My parents, Michael and Linda, were the picture of an ideal couple. And together they lived, in love, trust and respect, for 28 years. I used to think they were so perfectly in tune growing up. They threw each other jokes, they backed each other's hopes, and never once did I hear them arguing. Not even about the tiniest of issues such as what to eat for dinner or who left the trash out. They were sort of magic like that. But the last year my dad started noticing small, almost invisible changes in my mother. They started out to be the sort of things you didn't have to notice. She wasn't at home sometimes, she spent more time on her phone. She laughed at stuff she didn't tell the rest of us. My dad, being the good and dependable man he is, did not push her. He assumed she was seeing old friends or indulgent in a bad habit such as some internet meme blogging piss page. But inside he couldn't resist a growing creepiness. December came and with it one of my dad's work holidays. He was going out of town for a few days, as he had done many times before. But this time he could no longer shake off the hunch that something was not right. He brushed it off as silly or paranoid, but the suspicion stuck. But finally, just before he left, he did what he was told and placed a nanny cam in their bedroom. He was awful about it. That was such a loss of trust, but he told himself it was the only way to put his head down. The first night he watched the video, nothing was unusual. My mom was often on her phone, but that was no big deal. He was a little guilty of tracking her, and told himself to stop thinking. But on the second night his heart fell to bits. He called her late from his hotel room after working all day. She came back in a melancholy voice, telling me she was in love with him and was getting ready to go to sleep. Everything seemed fine. And then he saw through the camera and the reality. My mom laughed and giggled for 2 hours in a private moment with another. She was doing a private show for another man. A man who wasn't my dad. And the man he'd spent nearly 30 years creating a life with her and taking her at her word was now seeing it all fall apart around him. My father was sitting in his hotel room, crushed. He couldn't consciously think as shock and betrayal rolled over him. He was living with another man, and his beloved, the one person in the world he'd trusted above all others, was a liar. And then he decided he could not stay there after hours of painful silence. He got his stuff packed up, got in his car and began the 9-hour return journey. The motivation was inchoate. Fury, melancholy, ambiguity. He was desperate for the answers but scared about them. A part of him wished he could go up to her as soon as he entered the house, but another knew he had to plan. She'd delete everything if he went too soon, and he had to store up the evidence. Halfway down the drive, he was no longer going to be stingy. He rang and talked to her. He said it so terribly that he knew what she had been doing. First, she tried to say that it was nonsense, that he was crazy and must have had a mistake. But my father wasn't going down the rabbit hole. She shut it down finally and confessed she'd been talking to a man on Reddit for a year. She said that it was nothing serious, that she didn't even know him in real life, that it was just harmless play. But she had done nothing innocent. When he came home she had already deleted everything, all of the messages, all of the videos, everything. So out of desperation my father said to her, "Get away." It was the worst thing he had ever done, but he didn't want to go through this with their life together now. My mom went from place to place in the next few weeks, living with friends or in motels. She phoned us every now and again to let us know she was okay but sounded out of place, as though she were no longer her old self. But still we all worried about her. My father in particular was at once heartbroken and in love with her. He'd like her to return if only to mend something, and he didn't know if he could. Then one day, just when we thought we were on our way, we were called. My mom had been dead, found in a motel room. She'd committed suicide. I remember the day we received the news. I thought I'd had the floor dug out from under me. My mother was my idol, the one person I looked up to. She was sweet, compassionate, and family first. She was too precious to be gone, too abruptly, too suddenly. My dad was completely crushed. He blamed himself for everything, and believed she could have lived if only he'd treated things differently. He gave up food, he lost more than 40 pounds and spent most of his time sleeping. I was afraid his loss would slay him too. My last resort for help was to call the man my mom had spoken to. I wrote to him on Reddit, expecting some sort of resolution, but he never got back to me. My mother, for him, was probably nothing more than a blip, a spectacle. But for us, she was everything. Adultery does not only affect the individuals committing the adultery, it wrecks families like a hurricane. We continue to piece things together, but sometimes there seem to be too many for it ever to all come back together.